So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today I want to go over the weapon balance pass that we're gonna get soon. TM. Now in total there are 14 weapons that are gonna be affected by this balance pass. The majority of them is gonna get buffed, some of them are gonna get nerfed, and one, the Tails Boltis, is gonna be changed, so we'll have to wait and play with it to see whether it was a buff or a nerf. And let's actually start with the Tails Boltis. So Tails Boltis is probably the best syndicate melee weapon. The pulse you get when you do a slide attack is still incredibly powerful even after it's been changed a couple of times, and it's absolutely fantastic at decimating large groups of enemies and breaking containers throughout a mission. The first iteration of this weapon was incredibly powerful because you were able to get the slide attack pulse even if you did not have Tails Boltis equipped in your main hand, and it would proc slash 100% of the time. This, however, was changed fairly rapidly, requiring you to go into melee mode to get the benefit of the pulse, and also changing the pulse so it procs all status and not just slash. But it seems that it was still far too powerful, so they decided to remove that mechanic completely. Instead, now the first slide attack you do with the Tails Boltis will create a vortex that will draw enemies towards you and stagger them, and the following slide attack, after you've already created a vortex, will blast the enemies away from you and ragdoll them. And to discourage you from getting a carpal tunnel from slide attacking throughout the entire level, this will also be on a cooldown. At the moment, I can't say whether or not I like this change because I haven't played with it yet, but it will either be a straight up nerf or it will turn the Tails Boltis into an awesome crowd control weapon. Though it will probably lose its usefulness when it comes to running through a level and breaking all the containers through walls. Next up, we have some changes to the Simulor and the Sinoid version of the Simulor. So on the regular Simulor, the status chance has been increased to 30%. The AoE explosion range on the orbs, whether they explode on their own or you manually detonate them with the secondary fire, has been increased as well. Instead of starting off at 0.5 meters and capping out at 2.8 meters, it now starts at 1 meter and caps out at 6. And the damage of the explosion has been increased from 50 to 200 as well. However, they also decrease the range of the explosion when the orbs combine together. At the moment, it's 3 to 8 meters, but after the balance patch, it's only going to be 1 to 3 meters. And they've also nerfed the damage you get when the orbs stack quite significantly. Right now, it ranges from 150 to 250, and after the balance patch, it's only going to be 20 to 40. And the final change for the Simulor is that they reduce the amount of orbs you need to stack in order to create a vortex from 5 to 3. Now, the changes to the Sinoid version of the Simulor are pretty much the same. The status chance has gone up to 35%. The radius of the explosion when the orbs expire or you manually detonate them now range from 1 to 8 meters instead of 0.5 to 2.8 meters. The explosion damage has been increased from 50 to 250. The radius of the explosion when you stack the orbs has once again been increased, ranging from 1 to 3 meters instead of 3 to 8. And the damage of the explosion you get when the orb stack has been decreased, now ranging from 20 to 50 instead of 150 to 250. And just like with the normal Simulor, you only need 3 orbs instead of 5 to create a vortex. Now, I hesitate to call this a nerf because it's more of a change in focus of the weapon, because instead of relying on the explosion damage you get when you stack the orbs, you will now rely on the damage when you detonate the vortex. This will make multi-shot on the Simulor very strong because it will allow you to stack the vortex much faster. However, I'm a little bit worried about the change in focus because there are a couple of weapons like the Talons that you have to throw and then manually detonate, and they aren't a lot of fun to use. The weapon that's been hit the hardest by this rebalancing is definitely the Tonkor. So first of all, it will now deal full self-damage like all the other explosive launchers. It will also use a charge fire mode now, so you will have to hold down the button to charge the grenade, and you will fire the grenade by releasing the fire button. They also reduce the amount of bouncing the grenades do, so they should be easier to track, which is good since they now deal full self-damage, and they decrease the maximum lifespan of a grenade from 5 to 3 seconds, so they should explode sooner and hopefully in the middle of an enemy group. And finally, they reduce the critical chance of the Tonkor from 35 down to 25. This is a pretty big hit. Now, I'm a little bit torn on this. I don't understand the reduction in crit chance since we have weapons like the Tsar which do obscene amounts of damage, but I do understand why they added the self-damage because this was the only explosive weapon that didn't do any self-damage, well, outside of Penta with tether grenades. So this change brought it more in line with the other explosive weapons. And finally, I am just baffled by the change to the fire mode. Why make it a charge attack? Why not leave it instant? Is that to prevent you from blowing yourself up if an enemy comes too close? You're gonna do that anyway if you release it at the wrong time. I just don't understand why that was a change that needed to happen. Next up, we have the Ithaca, our lovely crossbow, and this weapon has been straight up buffed. They reduce the weapon recoil, which is good because this thing kicks like a mule on steroids, especially if you're aiming down sights. The flight speed of the bolts has been increased as well. They should make it much easier to hit enemies at a distance. The critical chance has been increased to 25%, the crit multiplier has been increased to 200%, and it's been given 4 more rounds in the magazine for a grand total of 20. So yeah, as I've said, a straight up buff. The Ogres, aside from getting a visual upgrade, has had its status chance increased to 35%. They've also reduced the amount of time it takes to charge each shot, and they've increased the flight speed of each rocket. The direct impact damage of each rocket has been decreased down to 100, but the AoE damage has been increased to 600, and the range of the explosion has been increased to 6 meters. And finally, to pick up the Ogres after the update, you will have to be at least Mastery rank 8. And this is a very solid buff to a weapon that not too many people use. So hopefully the Ogres will see more use. However, I hope these changes only apply to our version of the Ogres, because this is also the weapon that Bombards use. And if they get buffed, it's gonna be bad, okay? Then we're also gonna get some changes for the Glaxion, the freeze ray. So first of all, they're increasing the damage from 250 up to 333. They're also reducing the amount of ammo the Glaxion consumes without affecting damage at all, and they're increasing the accuracy of the Glaxion as well. However, the range of the Glaxion has been reduced from 30 meters down to 24. And since I haven't played with the Glaxion too much, I'm not gonna talk about it. Moving on, the Buzzlock. So first up, they reduce the amount of ammo that the secondary fire will consume down to 2. This is the one that tags the enemy and makes the bullets you fire with your primary fire home towards that enemy. They've also increased the damage from 45 to 60 and changed the damage distribution of the weapon, so it's now going to be 50% impact, 40% puncture, and only 10% slash. They've also reduced the magazine size down to 50 and increased the mastery rank requirement to 9. Now, they've also made the secondary projectile much faster, and they made it so that it can only stick to NPCs and characters, so you can no longer shoot it into a container and then have all the bullets you fire with the primary mode fly into that container. And finally, this is a pretty awesome change. Your primary fire will have 50% increased crit chance versus enemies that have been hit with a secondary fire. And that is pretty cool. Next up, we have Muchos Quanta, which I unfortunately don't have, so I'm very sorry for not showing a gameplay of it. And this one is getting more of a mechanical change rather than a straight up buff or a nerf. So the secondary fire on the Muchos Quanta is going to be very similar to the Simulo, which is very hard to say. So as you fire the secondary mode, it will create a big infested orb that you then can shoot with the primary mode for additional advantages. I have no idea what that means, so we'll have to see for ourselves once the update drops. Another weapon that I don't have because I don't want to get rid of my Mitre is the Pantera, so my apologies once again. But this one has also received quite a few changes, so the primary fire has been switched to automatic and they've ramped up the fire rate. The status chance of the primary fire has also been increased to 20%, and the critical chance of the primary fire is now 10%. The critical multiplier is now at 200%, and the ammo requirement has been reduced to 2. Now, as far as the secondary fire is concerned, the status chance is now 35%, the critical chance is 25%, and to use the Pantera, you now have to be Mastery rank 7 or higher. Now, the Hind, a weapon so bad that it made me scrap an entire video that I've worked on for a couple of days, has been given an alternate fire mode, so you'll be able to switch between the burst fire mode and a single-shot semi-automatic fire mode, where the Hind will do more damage, have higher critical chance, and also higher status chance. And this may actually make me want to go back and try the Hind again, because right now the burst fire it has is absolutely awful. It fires way too many bullets and it feels clunky as hell. Next up, we have the Parasit, which has been given quite a few buffs as well. So the damage of the primary fire has been increased by 5, which is very nice, and the critical chance of the primary fire has been increased to 10%. The status chance for both primary and secondary fire has been increased to 30%, and the range of the alternate fire has been increased to 50 meters. And finally, to use the Parasit, you now have to be at least Mastery rank 5. So once again, a very solid buff to the Parasit. The second to last weapon on this list is the Harpak, the hybrid of a harpoon and a burst rifle. So they reduce the recoil on the primary fire, which is kind of nice because the weapon does kick quite a bit. But they've also reduced the charge time on the harpoon, so it's now instant, which is awesome. The crit chance of the Harpak has also been increased up to 20%, and the range of the harpoon has gone from 15 meters up to 40. And finally, the harpoon is going to have an updated look, and they've also increased the flight speed of it. And the final item on the menu is one of my personal favorites, the Mitre. And the Mitre is just getting straight up more awesome. They've increased the chance of dismemberment on kills, which is amazing. They've increased the speed of projectiles. The charge time has been halved, which is a godsend because without any fire rate, it took far too long to charge the shots. And it's also been given some crits. So uncharged shots will have a 5% crit chance and charged shots will have 10% crit chance. Oh yeah, and you will now have to be at least Mastery Rank 6 to use it. And that's all she wrote, folks. That's all the changes we're gonna get with the next weapon balance patch. Now, if you invested Forma into one of the nerfed weapons, so Simulor, Sinoid Simulor, Telos Boltes, or the Tonkor, you'll be given a 3-day affinity booster and 1 free Forma for each one of the weapons, so you can reforma it for a new build. And that's pretty much it for the video. I've been rambling for 10 minutes, holy crap, so I thank you very much for watching. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.